Court of Appeals Judge Lisa Neubauer is running for a 10-year term on the Wisconsin Supreme Court. The election is April 2nd. She has been the Chief Judge of the Court of Appeals since 2015, and she was reappointed as Chief Judge in 2018. She's been on the Court of Appeals since 2007 when she was appointed by Governor Doyle. As I said, she's seeking a 10-year term. The election is April 2nd. Judge, welcome to WisconsinEye.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm so grateful to have this opportunity to speak with you and also to speak to the voters.
Thank you. There are 16 judges on the Court of Appeals.
Yes.
You all toil in relative anonymity, don't you?
Yes, we do.
You don't have the high-profile presence of the 7 members of the Supreme Court. So how do you run for an office after serving, since you've been on the Court of Appeals since 2007, running from a position of relative anonymity?
Well, it's an interesting question, but I have run for office and been elected twice. So after I was appointed in 2007, I actually had a very contested race. In 2008, I was elected in April of 2008. Mm-hmm. And in that election, I went around to my district. Now, my district hears the appeals from 12 counties around, but not including Milwaukee County.
Right. It's Court of Appeals District 2?
District 2,
yes.
And it's a quarter of the state, so 16, and we divide by 4 districts. And I went around that district, and I got an opportunity to meet with the judges, with the sheriffs, with the DAs, with the with the public defenders, with Republicans, with Dems, and I ended up having very, very broad bipartisan support in that election and winning 63% of the vote. I was up for re-election again in 2014, and in that case, in that election, I went back to all the folks in my district, and I had overwhelming support from the courthouse community, from so many people, and I was unopposed. So I haven't been completely hidden away. I've been elected twice in our district, and also I've been really very active because we are kind of hidden away. Everything we do is on paper, and so I have really made it a point to be out and about in our community, in the legal community, and in so many ways. So I've been on the Supreme Court Planning and Committee. It's called PPAC, the Strategy Committee, figuring out priorities for our court system. I've been on Bench Bar Committee, and it's a committee that's specifically intended to do interaction between the legal community and the bench so that we aren't just kind of cloistered away. It's really important that we have really good dialogue and really good interaction with the legal community. I've been on the Supreme Court Outreach Committee that it was intended to do education so that the public will have a better understanding of our courts. And I've also just been very hands-on. In Racine, we have a local criminal justice coordinating committee that is looking at alternatives to incarceration, looking at things like how to make good pretrial release. And I asked to sit on those meetings because I'm not a trial court judge, and I wanted to have a really much better understanding about how we're doing those things and what we can be doing better, since I was on the planning committee. And I've also just been really, I'm really active in my community, in my church, been very active in many, many ways in local charity and community events. And I've been a tutor in the Racine Public Schools for many years. Again, so that I'm not cloistered away, so that I am out there really, getting involved in my community in ways as a judge that is appropriate and that I can. So I tutored first, second, and third grade kids in several of our public schools over many years, which I absolutely, frankly, was the highlight of every week. I just love kids. And one of the young girls that I had as a student had a single mom, worked on the line, no other family in town, and I asked her mom if I could be her big sister through the Big Sisters program. Family just needed a little more help. Her mom was thrilled. And so I was Erica's big sister for many years until she moved away. So I have really made it a point to be out and about. I go to, we have bars in the local bars, so Racine Bar I'm a member of, Waukesha Bar I'm a member of, and I've gone to judges' nights in so many of our districts, but also in Milwaukee. I think it's so important that we as judges don't get removed from the public, and so I've made a very intentional point of being very active.
Thank you. At yesterday's Milwaukee Bar forum with your opponent, the question was asked, the biggest challenge facing Wisconsin courts in the next 5 or 10 years. And your opponent said the politicalization of the court.
Yeah.
Could I get you to respond to that comment by Judge Hagedorn?
Yes, I mean, you asked that question and I identified the drug and alcohol, the alternatives to incarceration, but we had previously spoken so much about that issue that I didn't repeat that. Mm-hmm. So yes, I think that I am running because we have to fight in our state for a fair, impartial, independent court. And what does that mean? It means that we have to have our public's confidence in our court system, that it is in fact that third branch, the nonpartisan branch that we all learned about in grade school civics. So for me, I don't bring any agenda, no predetermined outcome, no thumb on the scale, no ideology. We have to have our people have confidence that the courts are there for our people. And that's what I am fighting for in this election. And again, people say, well, what does that mean, Lisa? It means that, when our people walk through those doors, whether it's at the trial court level or the Court of Appeals or at the Supreme Court, our people have so much at stake, whether it's victims of crime or people at risk of losing their liberty, their children, their homes, their livelihood, their rights. They need to know, our people need to know that when they walk through those doors, they're going to receive justice. No thumb on the scale, no ideology. And that's the kind of judge I've been for 11 years. I've decided thousands of cases on the Court of Appeals. And that is why I believe that I have the support now of over 340 judges in this race, which I believe is quite unprecedented. And it's not just that the judges are saying we need to get somebody who has far more experience and qualifications than my opponent, because I have 30 years in the law, 20 as a litigator before 11 on the Court of Appeals, but it is the judiciary and the courthouse community of all the 80 plus sheriffs, DAs, former DAs, who are really, I used to say leaning in, they're not leaning in, they are shouting that we have to get a judiciary that the people have confidence is the nonpartisan branch. And so the 340 judges, that's 98% of the endorsing judges in this race. 98%. It's actually more than 98%. And it is those people saying, we trust Lisa to be what a judge must be: fair, impartial, independent, nonpartisan, an open mind for every case.
Judge Hagedorn has made the judge who you both want to secede an issue. He said that, and we're talking here about Justice Shirley Abrahamson, who's not only longest serving justice, but she was the longest serving Chief Justice. And Judge Hagedorn has repeatedly said, I knew how she was going to rule because she didn't like my client. He was then chief counsel for Governor Scott Walker. And so she had a political agenda on the court. So her legacy has become part of this campaign. Judge Hagedorn has also said, you consider Judge Abrahamson a model, which implies that you would replicate her record. Can you respond to that, please?
Yeah, I'm happy to have a chance to respond to that. When I announced my candidacy, I did acknowledge that this was the seat that Justice Abrahamson has had, and that she's not seeking re-election. She was a trailblazer for women. She was the first woman on our Supreme Court. Huge. She also was elected by the people of our state 4 times. She has served on our court now for 40 plus years. And for me as a woman, you know, I'm the first woman on my District 2 Court of Appeals. I'm the first woman who is a presiding judge of my Court of Appeals, which I did many, many years before the Supreme Court appointed me to be chief in 15 of our entire 16-judge Court of Appeals. I'm the first woman to be a chief judge of our Court of Appeals. And as a woman, I'm honored and I'm proud of that. And I have tried to pass that along to many women in my life. I was at Foley and Lardner for 19 years. I was really involved in recruiting. I was really involved in mentoring so many young people who came up through the legal system. I started at Foley with a brand new baby. My daughter Catherine was 6 months old, and I had my 3 kids during the time. I had an extraordinarily busy practice, and as a working mom, I really tried to pass that along to so many young women in our firm. But also, I'm a breast cancer survivor, and when I was diagnosed, I had very young children. And so many people reached out to me, so many women reached out to me, which was extraordinarily helpful and important to know that I was going to survive, and to know how to talk to young kids about being diagnosed with breast cancer, what it was going to be like going through chemo. So I have been a mentor now for women who have been diagnosed with breast cancer as well. So all of that kind of trailblazing, to me, is important.
Judge Hagedorn has said he has the endorsement of 5 current and former Supreme Court justices. Has Justice Abrahamson endorsed you?
You know, I haven't sought the endorsement. I have really focused on the circuit court judges and the Court of Appeals judges. This is a court that I hope to serve on. And so I have really focused on, you know, the judges that are at my level and at the circuit court level. And I'm really honored, not only the 340 judges I talked about, but on the very court that my opponent and I serve on. We have 16 judges, as you mentioned. 10 of my colleagues are supporting me. And 15 of my former colleagues are supporting me. And it's not, you know, again, these are people who probably know my work ethic, you know, my skills and collegiality and leadership, my experience, as compared to my colleague. They, you know, these are the people that actually read all of our decisions. We have like 2,400 cases a year on the Court of Appeals. So I am so honored to have that kind of, you know, support from the very people who know the two of us probably the best of anyone in the state. That's 25 Court of Appeals judges who are supporting me.
Final question on Justice Abrahamson. I'm kind of surprised that she's become an issue in the race. How do you feel when Judge Hagedorn says, I knew she was going to rule against me because she didn't like my client and her political philosophy she did not share with Governor Walker? So he's saying that she was biased because of her political philosophy against Governor Walker. As a long-serving judge, your response to that?
You know, I think that Judge Hagedorn, in his campaigning, in his statements in these debates and forums, I mean, I think he's signaling to people every single day where he's going to be coming out on things. And it's not just his statements now in the course of this campaign, it's so many of his past activities, the writings, and his actions as a judge. So I guess I would say that I think the voters need to look very, very carefully at those kind of statements, those kind of, you know, those kind of views, because to me they reflect they reflect that he has, partisan intentions.
At the State Bar Association forum, you, in your opening statement, you said that you have a record of being tough but impartial. Mm-hmm. How can voters know how an example of you being tough?
Well, I mean, I've had hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of cases, and many, many cases involving, sexual assault victims, sexual domestic abuse, so many cases involving the opioid crisis. And I think my record reflects exactly that I am tough but fair, that I follow the Constitution, that I follow the law, and that I am deeply, deeply committed to doing that. And again, I think that's why, that so many of the people who really know our work are supporting me, because they see that I not only say that, it's exactly what I've done for 11 years.
Campaigns for the Supreme Court now, when you add up the third-party spending, cost millions of dollars. Does it? Are you bothered as a veteran judge by having to do what's called dialing for dollars? When you ask someone to donate to your campaign, is it in the back of your mind, okay, what could they end up appearing before the Supreme Court? What might they want potentially in exchange if they write a $1,000 check?
Yeah, well, I can't ask for money. I mean, as a judge, we are precluded from doing that. So that's kind of a fundamental stake in the ground in
and
terms
that's a good
of a
thing,
campaign.
right?
Yes,
right.
yes,
Okay.
yes. I totally agree with that.
Do you go through a list of contributors, though?
I've been reaching out to people all over this state. I've been to over 40 courthouse visits. I've been to so many community events. I've been to so many firms. I've been to, I can't tell you how many events I've been to. And I am reaching out to a very broad base of people. And I'm really thrilled how many people are really engaging in this race. How our people in this state really care about getting our judiciary to a place where it has the confidence of our people. So there's just been a huge lean in, starting with, in December, 8,000 people signing my nomination papers. I was completely freaked out in early December about getting, 3,000 signatures, and they just poured into our office. So I'm really thrilled with the broad base, and again, broad bipartisan base of support that I'm continuing to get in this election.
I know you've had a career on the bench of 11, almost 12 years. Is there one ruling that you're most proud of?
I've been asked that so many times, and it's very hard for me to say that because, frankly, I'm proud of my whole record. I really am. I have literally had hundreds of published and precedential decisions. We have what's called cases that have controlling authority, and then we have cases that are persuasive, and we do both. So I have had so many decisions, and I'm really, frankly, I'm really, really proud of my whole record put together. I feel that I have, I really work hard. I'm extraordinarily dedicated to making sure that I get it right, that I'm following the Constitution, that I'm following the law, and that I'm doing the homework and the work that I need to really dig into what is the law here and what are the facts here. And I'm just somebody who has a deep sense of curiosity and a deep sense of commitment to making sure I get it right in every single case. So I'm really proud of all my work.
One of the questions from the audience at yesterday's Milwaukee Bar Association I didn't get a chance to ask is this: in a case involving a constitutional issue of first impression, how would you research that?
Oh, well, I mean, again, we'd go back, we'd look at the Constitution to the extent that there was, writings about what this provision meant. We'll start with that and then bring it forward. There are so many constitutional cases that we get. The vast majority of them are Fourth Amendment search and seizure cases. That's kind of the bread and butter of a lot of our cases. But, I've had First Amendment cases. I've had, the Establishment Clause cases. And, you start with the writings, and then, you look at all the law that's out there. And in so many of these cases, we're looking to federal decisions, federal Supreme Court decisions, and if there's not, Court of Appeals decisions. I've often looked at Court of Appeals decisions from around the country. And again, I am not somebody who, I really do my homework and my research to make sure that I'm really looking at this issue, really digging into it, and doing the best I can to get it right.
I alluded earlier to the fact of how much Supreme Court campaigns now cost. Do they cost too much? Is there any way to dial that back?
Well,
or is this just a modern reality?
When I first announced, I called on the outside money to come out of our races, and I believe that now, and I believed it then, I believed it now.
So Mr. Holder should not spend that $350,000.
Well, as I said, I've been consistent in my position in this race. So, it's really, I think that the issue is one that tees up the recusal issue. And the recusal issue is when a judge has had literally, or a justice has literally had, millions and millions of dollars spent on the race from a party. At what point does the public lose confidence that there's, impartiality or no bias? And I think that our Supreme Court declined to address that issue. Mm-hmm. They declined to have hearings on a petition that was teeing up that very issue to our court.
If you're on the court, would you ask that the issue be reconsidered?
Yes, I would.
Potential trigger amounts to get someone off?
Yes, because again, I think this is about the impartiality of our court and the confidence of our people that our court is there for them. And we have to make sure that our people have confidence that they're receiving justice, no bias, no thumb on the scale. And so the recusal issue is an issue that we need to hear from the people on. And how can we have the people's confidence when the court has said, we're not even going to hear your opinion on this?
I want to pursue this a little more because having covered a few Supreme Court debates, I remember one argument, and let's set up a hypothetical. If the court established a 100,000, if a threshold of 100,000, if a group gave 100,000 to a sitting justice's campaign, she or he should get off the case. The argument was made, well, that provides just a blueprint for groups to force justices off a case, thinking, well, if I give 100,000, then so-and-so justice has to get off that case. What's your response to that argument?
Well, the recusal issue is not an easy issue. There's due process is the sort of bottom line. At what level is there an appearance of bias? At what level does the public, have a concern that there's going to be bias? And so, I have said on the campaign trail that I definitely want to hear from the public, from the stakeholders, from the bench, from the bar, because exactly these kinds of issues need to be fleshed out. Mm-hmm. And so I would want to have an open mind and to hear from folks, what's working, what's not, what's appropriate, what's not. And, the other issue here that I see as being intertwined is that if a justice recuses under our current Constitution, there's no replacement. And that's a big deal. I've had cases that have come up through our Court of Appeals where it went up to the Supreme Court, and because one justice recused, it ended up to be 3-3.
Yes.
And so that's a tie that affirms the lower court decision. And if I were a party, and I was a lawyer for parties for 19 years, I would be very upset that, you essentially didn't get a decision out of the Supreme Court. So that's an issue I think that also needs to be addressed sort of part and parcel. So it's a multifaceted issue that we need to hear from the people on.
Campaign finance laws were completely rewritten 3 or 4 years ago. And now it is legal, very legal, for candidates to coordinate with third-party groups. At the State Bar Association forum last Friday, Judge Hagedorn said, I am not coordinating with third-party groups. Are you and your campaign coordinating?
No, I am not coordinating. Nope.
Okay.
I read about Eric Holder in the paper.
Okay. Let me ask you this question. Do you think, this is a question about the criminal justice system overall, are we at risk of losing our best and brightest when DAs, ADAs, and public defenders are taking other jobs that pay better, that have lower caseloads? Is this a threat to the criminal justice system, Your Honor?
You know, I guess I'm a little disinclined to weigh in on that because that really is a legislative decision. But what I would say is that I have been to almost 40 courthouse visits, and I have sat down with DAs, and I have sat down with judges, and I have sat down with sheriffs, and I've sat down with public defenders. And every single courthouse I have been to is struggling. And the DAs tell me I have 3 DAs and I need 6. And the studies show that. And obviously the public defender issue is a huge issue. I talked to a judge up in Sawyer County a week or 2 ago who is supporting me. And, and he said, Lisa, we had to make 2,000 phone calls to get a lawyer to represent one person.
2,000?
Mm-hmm. And I was up in Green Bay, and I went over to meet with the public defenders, and one of the young women there said, here is 100 cases that we're looking for a public defender replacement on, and I've made 90 phone calls for each one of these cases. Now, obviously, there aren't that many lawyers in Brown County. So it is a real issue. People are sitting in jail for months waiting for the appointment of a lawyer. But that is an issue I understand the legislature is now addressing. And so, you know, that's really where that has to come from at this juncture.
We're almost out of time, but just a couple more questions. The concept, what's been called a civil Gideon, that if someone is facing eviction or a domestic issue, they have a right to an attorney. Mm-hmm. That's come before the court, and it's been debated, but it's not currently pending before the court. Do you support civil Gideon?
You know, again, as with anything, I'd want to have an open mind about that. You know, what I can tell you is that I was on the board of Legal Action of Wisconsin for many years. I was also on the board of the Equal Justice Coalition, and that was set up because the funding for legal services for the poor from the federal government level has been under threat and under siege time and time again. And so the Equal Justice Coalition was set up to make sure that we have funding for legal action, legal aid, judicare. So this has been an issue that as a lawyer I was very involved in terms of, you know, making sure that we were providing legal services for people who didn't otherwise have access to the courts. And I have done pro bono litigation for people. I did pro bono litigation when working with someone from Legal Action for a woman who was evicted from public housing wrongly. And I've done other pro bono litigation for people who didn't have access to justice or who needed a lawyer. So this is something that I have really I have been, as a lawyer, mm-hmm. was quite really put my heart and soul into.
Just 2 final questions. Do you think there's less respect for courts than when you joined the bench in 2007, generally?
I think there's a feeling of skepticism. And I, again, the very beginning of our discussion, you talked about that we only see things on paper. Yeah. So I have less interaction with the public than the trial court judges. But I have the support of 340 trial court judges, or 340 judges who are on the ground at Court of Appeals too. Mm-hmm. And when I talk with the trial court judges, what they tell me time and time again is that there is a great concern that this feeling of partisanship has trickled down from our Supreme Court and is permeating into our whole justice system. So the very first county I went to after I announced, the judge, one of the judges there said to me, Lisa, you know, sometimes people walk in our courtrooms and there's this feeling of skepticism. Am I going to get a fair shake? Is there some thumb on the scale? And we cannot have that in our justice system here in our wonderful state of Wisconsin. It's about our democracy, that our people walk through those doors and they have confidence. They're going to get a fair shake. And it wasn't just the first county I went to. You know, it is also when I speak with the sheriffs, with the DAs, with the public defenders, in the criminal justice system. Again, is there some feeling that people have? Thumb on the scale, ideology, agenda. We can't have that in our court system. It's so fundamental to our democracy. This race is not just about our Supreme Court. It's about our whole court system and restoring our people's confidence in our court system. And beyond our court system, it's about our democracy. You know, the founders set up the three branches for a reason, that the courts have to be there to protect our people for the people, the nonpartisan branch. That's the kind of judge I've been for 11 years. It's not just that I do it because I think it's a nice idea. I am fundamentally committed to that role in our society, in our state, that the judiciary is in that position of being the people's court.
Well, I was going to ask you for a closing argument, but you just gave it. So, Court of Appeals Judge Lisa Neubauer is one of two candidates for a 10-year term on the Wisconsin Supreme Court. The election is April 2nd. Judge, thank you for talking to WisconsinEye.
Thank you. Very grateful.
Thank you.